Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today in the studio is Road Test editor Zach Palmer. What's going on, man?
Oh, nothing much. Just excited to talk about the C8 on this podcast with James.
Speaking of, on the phones from the West Coast, the most recent driver of the Midengine C8 Corvette, James Riswick. How's it going, man?
Very good. I'm enjoying my apparent celebrity related to driving the Corvette. Hey,
it's true. We did put your name up in lights, give it the whole Hollywood treatment. Although, trivia question, I believe the Chevy Suburban has the Hollywood sort of footprint, if you will, or handprint. The Corvette needs to get one, I guess. Yeah, flat joke. Zach just kind of rolled his eyes and exhaled. But let's get right into it. Got a great show here, by the way. So we will talk about the Corvette. If you came for the Corvette, also stay for the Mercedes GLE. Zach and I spent some time in that. We'll break down some news. We've got basically an all EV segment, news out of GM, what they're doing, and then we'll spend some money. So it's going to be Corvette. Then we're going to rip through a bunch of other stuff, keep this fast-paced, keep it light, and keep it fun. So with that, was it fun to drive the C8 Corvette?
It was. It's a very different experience from Corvettes of the past, which isn't surprising given the fact that it's mid-engine now. But it is a profoundly different experience just from the way you sit in it. You no longer have 8 feet of hood in front of you anymore, it's different. It just doesn't have that kind of the fact that the engine's making its noise behind you, both is different in terms of direction, but you're also hearing different noises than you would if there was if there was a lot more car in between you and the engine. The fact that it's mid-engine also does obviously change its dynamics on a track, which I was able to drive it on. It is so very well balanced. The turn-in is as crisp as you would imagine it to be. It's just a profoundly different car than it was before, and really it's a more modern car. I think, and I kind of hope that as such it will attract new buyers, because that's what Corvette really needs to do. Because someday just having a V8 engine is not going to work. There are more revolutionary things than just moving the engine coming for the Corvette to succeed into an electrified future. And making it more relevant is a good way to do that with a more modern audience. Did it go far enough in terms of its design? I don't know. A lot of people have criticized the rear end as being kind of a little derivative to other Chevy products, and perhaps not as, let's say, unique as the rest of the car is. But nevertheless, that's really what I wanted to tell, the story I wanted to tell in my first drive of the car, which is that this does need to be something different to attract a new audience. Because frankly, old guys in Hawaiian shirts and bros in flat bill hats just salivating over specs is not the way of the future. The Vette needs to evolve, and it definitely has done that.
What I think is interesting about that last statement there, James, is we've sort of been hearing this now since back even, the last generation, the C7. They were sort of like, hey, we need to make this car a little bit more, again, not the boomer car, make it more Gen X, Gen Y. To me, with this design, they're really going for Gen Y and going forward. They don't just want like if the, sort of the C7 is like maybe our parents, and then they want the C8 to be like, James, you and I are probably like the old people they want for this. They want this car, I think, to be more like the Zach car. Like the people like in their 20s are like, we want this, we have to have this. We think this is cool based on its own merits. Whereas in the past, I think people would buy a Corvette because they wanted a Corvette, or they like the heritage, they like the history. I think in a place the Corvette hasn't always won is just sort of in like an open field where it's like, pick the coolest car. And then like the younger folks invariably pick something else. I think this is the car that might really start to pull in that whole new demographic for Corvette. I don't know, you're part of that demographic, so am I somewhat, but what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, no. When you say like this is the Zach Corvette, I absolutely agree with that statement because I was never a real big Corvette guy before the C8 was announced. And then as soon as it was announced, I was like, oh my God, I want a C8 Corvette. This is everything that, you want in a sports car. At least for me, it's totally different. Mid-engine, that's huge. And actually, the line, when I was reading your review, James, right at the end where you make the comparison to the NSX, that is something that really hit me. And I think that analogy is perfect. It's democratizing the sports car to a certain degree in a different way. I mean, even the base price of this car, the base price of an NSX was $60,000 when it was new in 1991. Obviously, that's a lot more expensive in today's money, but just all of those comparisons, and I was just curious, like, is this really going to be that huge democratization of the sports car? I mean, were you really blown away by it in that way, and that it's a huge seminal car for the future going forward here?
I wouldn't say I was blown away, but I do think that it has the potential to do what you're saying, and I totally agree with you, Greg, in terms of just the potential for changing demographics of the Corvette. And it's not just age, as far as I'm concerned. It's just time. It's moving. So the C7 is a great car. It was a far better performance machine than the car that came before it. And frankly, I thought it was a much less. I can't imagine some 75-year-old man who's an old Corvette enthusiast really getting the full extent of this C7 out. That car's not really for him either. But with the design being so evolutionary and layout of everything of the past 3 to 4 generations beforehand, it was kind of hard to break out that mold. And the other thing is, I used to live in Los Angeles, very style-conscious place where what the car is, how it looks, is far more important than what the actual performance capability of it is. There's a reason people are buying AMGs all over Los Angeles, and it's not because of the twin-turbo V8s. It's all about image. So, and in that way, I couldn't. No, you never saw any Corvettes around. It wasn't an image that people wanted to show off. If anything, it was a negative image. Mid-engine sports car, however, Corvette or no, that you pull up in with a valet or something, that's going to resonate, and I think it will. That is how this makes a difference. It is totally vain, but that's the reality. And they need to attract people who are attracted to it for more reasons than, well, the better ones of what it can do on the road and the specs and why it's such a great car. It needs to be something that people desire who really don't care as much about it. Like a Porsche 911, a Porsche Boxster, because it's also mid-engined. People can buy those if they don't really care about it as a performance machine. Someone who just is attracted to the brand, to the design, that they need to. That's who I'm talking about in terms of expanding the Corvette's appeal, and this car absolutely does that. While also being a thoroughly astonishing car to drive around a racetrack, it's incredibly easy. A lot of the other things people were a little iffy about, no manual transmission. I love manual transmissions. I'd want one in every car I own. But honestly, with this super modern, forget the price tag for a minute. Look at the performance. This is a mid-engine supercar. And manual transmission, or even just a regular automatic transmission, is not really in keeping with that vein. The dual clutches that's in the car is sensational. If you do just want a nice, smooth automatic, it does that. I honestly forgot it had a dual clutch for the first couple of miles that I was driving the car. There's no jerkiness at low speed or anything like that. It's in fact a little smoother than Porsche's PDK. On the track, it's not quite as anticipatory to your needs, specifically downshifting as PDK, but that's an extremely high bar. So even if you're maybe a little more inclined to pull a paddle now and then, it's still really well executed, and certainly it would have room for improvement, but not a lot.
So to kind of riff on what you're saying there, I actually think the Midengine Corvette is going to be one of the better values in the market, just full stop, period. For under $60,000, just barely under 60, you get a Midengine essentially supercar. I think that's a great deal. I think it really brings like the highest level of dynamics to a lot of different people. $60,000 is not a cheap car at all, but it's a lot less than $100,000 or $200,000, or pick how much some of the other mid-engine sports cars cost. You know, $60,000, a lot of different people can find ways to get in that car. And I think that's very intriguing. And there's not many other things like that. You mentioned the Cayman and the Boxster, the Alpha 4C, which is cheap, but I mean, that's a rough ride. That's a very niche audience. A lot of different people could be attracted and access the mid-engine Corvette, which I think is interesting. So I guess that's kind of a question I have for you, James, is like a mid-engine layout. What's it like just to drive daily? Because obviously in Michigan, you see a ton of domestic cars. You see a lot of Corvettes. People just, you get the GM discount. People, obviously you talk about the core Corvette base. There's a lot of those people here. I mean, but obviously you could drive a C6, a C7 just every day if you'd like. It's not the greatest experience in some weather, but it could be a daily driver. I mean, how do you feel as the C8 a daily driver, if you so choose?
Well, to be a politician for a moment, I will answer that in a second, but address your first thing first about
Thank
the
you,
price.
Senator Riswick.
So the price is interesting because I always felt that the previous Corvettes, that was its selling point. Like, this was the thing everybody always said, like, oh, I could buy a Porsche 911, yada, yada. But, like, why would you buy a Corvette? It's a performance bargain. It only costs $60,000. It does all this. This one, I feel, almost can stand by itself, and you're almost like, and it only costs this. So it's almost like a surprise. And frankly, yeah, it has $60,000, but when I was building one and looking at, given all the many options I sampled on the event, I think I'd be looking around 83, 85, because one of the things that's great about it, and I could be wrong, but I think it shows up on the 3LT trim, is the FE4 magnetically controlled suspension, which talks to your daily driver question. Now, that has obviously the magnetically controlled suspension, which is the latest generation now in the Corvette. It obviously plays a big role in terms of the Corvette's capability on a track, mountain road, firms up the suspension when you need it, automatically adapts, yada, yada, yada. However, it's really the daily driver comfort that I'm most impressed with. In every car from a Mustang has also done this with its mag suspension, is that it can be both a performance machine and comfortable as a daily driver, and that's clearly what is going on in the Corvette. I was really impressed with its comfort. The space inside, there's quite a lot of space. Headroom can be a little tight. If you need to wear a helmet on a track, you better not be tall, because you're going to sit in an odd way because of it. Or just remove the roof. I guess that's the other thing you could have done. The trunks and the frunk, very useful. It's a more useful space that's than what's in a Cayman, for instance. Your baggage will get hot, though, because there's a giant V8 engine just a couple of inches away. It'll get warm. It's not like it's going to set it on fire or anything. But still, kind of similar to the NSX, Zach, actually. Because its engine was... The packaging of the rear is very similar to the NSX. But unlike the NSX, there actually is a frunk, and you can put a pretty sizable suitcase up there. So, in terms of daily driving, absolutely, it's got space. It has that comfortable ride. I didn't drive one on the street without mag suspension, so I can't comment about that. And the other thing is it's pretty quiet. It's a very quiet car. even with as loud of an engine as you'd think it would be, it really isn't. It's pretty damn refined. If anything, when you really push it, it could be a bit louder. So maybe that answers your question.
That was actually one of the things that I read about, I was shocked reading a lot of the reviews where like people actually thought it was super quiet, which, I thought you might have a much more intake noise with the engine right behind you there. But it sounds like even with the performance exhaust option, Chevy still has kept things, pretty daily driver friendly. And, if you want an aftermarket exhaust, then you can get it louder. Or maybe, the Z06 or versions after that will, really ramp up the oral sounds that you get from the car.
So another thing that we traditionally sort of just bagged on the Corvette for, and especially in like the C6, this was pretty true. And I think it was somewhat of a bad rap, the interior. It's almost easy to sort of, use sub-GM vehicles as a punching bag. What did you think, James?
So I thought the C7 interior is actually pretty nice, but it was nice for $60,000 given the performance, again, to that point. This thing, the materials quality is better, and I now would say that it's good for a $60,000 to $80,000 car, no performance element required. It's good enough for that. But more importantly, it's really cool in there. It is legitimately cool. It is different. I think it is more kind of characterful and interesting than the exterior is. I mean, you have that giant sail panel with all the climate control buttons. It works really well. I like buttons for climate control. They lead into the big screen that falls right at your hand, and it is angled towards the driver. Now we talk about this, but like old BMWs, they were kind of angled towards the driver, but this thing is really angled towards you to the point that it's comical for the passenger. The passenger, you kind of feel like you're in a sidecar because you have this great big wall next to you, and the touch screen is kind of almost at a 45-degree angle from you. It's kind of trippy, and it just provides a totally different feel. And that's what's cool. That's another element of the supercar thing, because supercars are always kind of bonkers inside in some way, and that's absolutely what this is. And that also speaks to like the desirability outside of the typical car enthusiast, because it needs to feel special. It needs to look special. And with the interior, it absolutely does.
One thing that some mid-engine supercars really hit or really don't hit is visibility. Can you see out of the damn thing?
You can out front, and you can see out better than you could with any front engine car, because there's not an engine up there. The front, especially when you're on the track, it's super easy to spot the thing now into corners because the road, bam, right there. The rear view, by the standards of most cars, is terrible. Because so you can there's obviously there's a window there, but with the glare coming off the engine and the angle, and if it's sunny as it was when I was driving it around Vegas, you can't see anything out the back, which isn't surprising. So, which does make the point that on most of the Corvettes, it does come with the rear view camera, or not the what is it? The rear camera mirror thing that was introduced on Cadillac.
Yep.
Frankly, when I tried that on the CT6, I was startled by it. I turned it on and it scared me. It was startling because its focal point's so different, and this thing that you've never thought twice about before is suddenly different, and it kind of throws you. I just had one in the Toyota RAV4, didn't use it. But with the Corvette, because it's necessary, it's serving a practical purpose. And I think that's where that technology really comes in handy. Whether you're driving like an SUV with cargo up to the roof, that's where it makes sense. And in a Corvette where you can't see anything out the back, or visibility sucks, it's a good thing. So I definitely make sure your Corvette has one of those. But frankly, given the way they're packaged, it probably will anyway.
Very cool, very cool. So I think the interesting thing about the mid-engine Vet now is there was just so much of a buildup, so much hype, so much anticipation. It was polarizing. Some people, just the notion of going mid-engine was controversial for some. I know just the different things that we now know about it, some of the options, just the engine choices. Some people think they went too far. Some people think they didn't go far enough. I think there is, a school of thought that this would have been a great time to go straight to some form of electrification, do something different with the powertrain. I guess we'll wrap up this segment with a couple questions. Do you think they went far enough? Do you think they took enough risks on this Corvette, James?
I think they could have gone a little further in terms of the design. I think they could have moved a little further from the Corvette norm. True, they've had a lot of evolutionary year or just generations. But frankly, like C2 to C3, like those are both Corvettes, but they look absolutely nothing alike. So I think, especially at the rear, I think the rear is definitely its weakest point. I was trailing a C7 on the track, and I was like, that's a better looking car. So I think they could have been a little more adventurous in that. To your point about electrification, I do think that they needed to go mid-engined first, and then that has opened the box for even more revolution. And I do think it's now possible for there to be an electric Corvette, and I think it could be absolutely awesome. But they needed to do the engine in the back first, which they've done. And also with the V8, I think it's either like electric or V8. Like putting in, the equivalent of an EcoBoost V6 in or something. Like, no, that would have been, that's no bueno. So I think you can see where this is going. And I think this opens the door and makes the future of Corvette possible. Whereas just doing the same thing over and over again, that has a best by date.
I think that's a great quote right there. It makes the future of Corvette possible. And I think when you look at the different options they could have done and probably still will do, I think this is sort of like the gateway drug, is get the car set up the way they think the future is going to demand of a modern Corvette, and then start to tinker with what the powertrains look like. I think actually sort of like what Ford is doing, although it's a different approach, is having a Mach-E Mustang and then having traditional Mustangs. Now, granted, they changed the body style. You've got like an SUV Mach-E crossover, whatever, and then you've got the traditional Mustang. What I actually think Corvette should do is have one body style, if you will, the mid-engine one, and then offer a V8 and offer a full electrified version. I think, and then let sales and demand determine how many engines, or powertrains they make of each. I think that would be the right play for Corvette. I don't think Corvette needs like a whole portfolio of vehicles, if you will. It doesn't need to become its own brand, although there's some studies that think it would be more valuable than almost anything else GM makes. But I mean, I think that would be the right strategy, is let the market decide how they take their Corvette. And I think, maybe we'll see that going forward. GM has a lot of electric vehicle plans of the future. Check those out on our website. John Snyder, our green editor, went to an event yesterday, actually, and tons of stuff from there. But just to bring things back to Corvette, real simple question, James. Did this Corvette live up to the hype?
I think it absolutely does. It was supposed to be a very important car, and yes, and you can see clearly how insane this thing will be when the ZR1 and Z06 and Grand Sport and all the other ones come out. Like, you can the base car is kind of overwhelmingly powerful, and you can now put the power to the ground. That whole wow, what happens when they put even more in? It's going to be fun.
Cool. All right, that's the mid-engine Corvette. I mean, we've been waiting years to do this podcast. So we finally did. I'm sure we cannot wait to get it in the office. We can't wait to talk more about it, but we're going to move on to some other subjects. We'll kind of keep the rest of the show tight and bright. Zach and I basically have both driven the new GLE in the office. This is the GLE 350. I'm actually currently still signed out in this vehicle, and you had it Monday night.
I did, yes.
What'd you think?
So this was my first time in the GLE, the new GLE, and it was totally redesigned. We actually had the first drive on the website about a year and a half ago, but that was the Euro version. Now we actually get a chance to drive it here. We got it in the 350 spec, which is the 2-liter turbo and 9-speed multi-clutch transmission. And that's actually probably one of the first points that I'd like to make there is, I'm somewhat surprised that Mercedes went with the multi-clutch transmission as opposed to a torque converter, just because this is, a pretty large-ish family crossover. And there is a little bit of unsmoothness when I was driving. You notice the shifts more than you see in a torque converter. But when you're actually getting on it and going fast, it's definitely more engaging. You're getting quicker shifts. But honestly, those things are not what's important to this car. Wait,
you don't think the average GLE buyer is going to talk about the transmission ratios?
That's something that we can nerd out on, but no, this car, I think it looks really good. The really nice, it's almost like a pen-pointed grille. It's got all these little chrome inserts in it. Looks fantastic. I think the size of it is impressive. You open the back door and you step inside and there's more back seat room than a regular E-Class. This is the E-Class size of SUV, and there's a great reason right there why somebody would choose this over a sedan version of the E-Class. You get all that space, and it's a huge trunk too. It has all of the fancy new Mercedes gadgets, M-Bucks. I think I said the word Mercedes like 3 or 4 times in my night with it. Activated the Mercedes Assistant every single time. That's still slightly annoying in all the new Mercedes. But, this one was also the standard suspension, just steel springs. It wasn't the air suspension or the E-Active body control, which is an option on the GLE. Honestly, this rode really well. I'm sure that the air suspension is a little bit better, but I don't think you're missing out on a lot if you skip the multi-$1,000 E-Active body control. Despite how cool it is, it's unbelievably cool. You can make it bounce and all that, but hey, even the standard suspension on a big Mercedes SUV is really, really good and very comfortable.
That's a really good suspension. I found myself kind of, this is a cliche, but pushing the vehicle, if you will, taking turns. It's fun.
I know.
Steers really well, handles well.
That's something that I feel like a lot of the larger German SUVs hit well that, maybe you don't get in some of the Japanese stuff or larger American SUVs. Even something as large as a GLE, or to bring BMW into the whole conversation, the X5, those are both like surprisingly good handlers for their size. And yeah, just like you did, I was having some fun on, whatever small highway entrance ramps, exit ramps, cloverleafs that we had around here. It's a little bit more than you'd expect. And that's what you get. You pay $72,000 for a luxury car. You expect a good suspension, very great technology, tons of space. I think it looks great. It's a really tough choice between this and an X5 for me, though. I'm like right on the cusp.
I tend to skew more towards like BMWs, but this vehicle, I found myself thinking, I think Mercedes pulled a little bit ahead in this segment. I think just from the, the handling, it's about the same. I think, the powertrain options are, they're both somewhat interesting. The design, I think inside and out, the Mercedes wins. I think BMW, and obviously design's so subjective, but I think BMW is they're getting a little cartoonish with some of their looks, and Mercedes is just it's a little more timeless. Overall, I really liked driving it. I can't wait to drive it tonight, actually. I would say I was a little underwhelmed the last time we had a GLC. I mean, just the C segment SUV, I think is a little tighter than I think your average American might like, just because, I tend to put a car seat in the back of these things. C segment SUV, it's a little tougher back there. You get into the E segment, you're like, okay, everything fits really well. There's room. You could put, the seat doesn't have to be up by the steering wheel. You don't have to be like steering with your knees or something. So, I mean, I guess short answer is to say I tend to like slightly larger SUVs, which, that's neither here nor there. But I do think the execution versus, the GLE, I think it just felt a little more natural versus like the GLC, where it felt like they were trying to just like pour some Mercedes into that segment and roll with it. Again, that's, sort of my take. Others may prefer the smaller one. One thing that does bug me a little bit is the infotainment control.
Really?
And yeah, I kept bumping my arm against it while trying to just adjust the heater and the other controls. Even grabbing my coffee mug, it was right where my forearm would land, and I'd inadvertently change the radio station. I don't know, did that bug you at all?
The only time I ever inadvertently hit that was when I was trying to plug my phone in for Apple CarPlay.
Okay.
The plug itself is pretty close to the actual touchpad, so you have to sort of tuck it deep into a pocket to make sure the wire isn't moving around, because if it does move around right there when you're going around a corner or something, it'll move across the touchpad, and the touchpad actually picks that up as, you messing with the screen, and then the screen starts to go off into the middle of nowhere. But I mean, for the most part, I really, really liked Mercedes M-Bucks. I've liked it on pretty much every Mercedes that I've driven. This one had the super fancy energizing comfort options, so I got a massage. I got some fancy music played to me.
I did not know it had the massage. I'm gonna be having a massage.
Oh man,
home.
There's at least 5 different massage programs in there. It'll even get some exercises queued up for you. You can do some weird muscle stretching. It's like a bit of a spa in there, I suppose. There's so many different. I mean, the actual names for these things, like energizing or comfort or revitalization, and you just kind of select those, and then you get some random music, and it's like, all right, yeah, sure. This is cool. This is what $72,000 of Mercedes SUV buys you.
I tend to be really critical of especially German SUVs, the prices that they charge and how much you don't get. I actually thought you do get a good value for about, 71 for this one. It's pretty reasonable. You get a lot of stuff. But I think we're going to lose people if we're talking about the different massages that our press cars offer. I think we may be veering into territory where you just start to lose listeners and disgust.
I've started playing with the dog, guys.
Yeah, he's been playing with the dog over there. All right, let's talk some news maybe, because people are going to think we're like the 1% here. All right, so GM EV Day. John Snyder was there. They rolled out all kinds of EVs. Just random things that GM is going to do. I think it's, as much as this was about product, I think this was about showing investors, hey, we actually are going to do this, and you should have confidence in us. And yeah, I think that's entirely reasonable. I mean, listen to these names. Celestic, I'm probably butchering that. The Lyric. We know there's going to be a Hummer truck and SUV, which was a little vague before. Just lots of stuff going on there. Lots to unpack. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring cameras to it, but I think it's smart of GM to try and get out in front of sort of the coming just wave of everything that's going on and try to make sure that the world knows, hey, they have a plan, they have products in the pipeline. Some of these sound interesting. I think what happens is if you don't articulate that, you get into the spot that Ford's in, where people are criticizing you because they don't think you have a plan, even though you might. You're just not really laying it out. Or FCA, in which case people just don't even think you have a plan at all. They think you're going to make Jeeps and Rams until, the dinosaurs come back, and then when they do, you're just going to go out of business. I really think the Detroit 3 have different levels of perceived give a damn about the future. I think people again, with Ford, they're concerned and don't think they have it. With FCA, I think they're just like, yeah, whatever. We'll see what you guys do. But then with GM, I do think there's this sort of level of like, well, what are you guys working on over there? We're interested. Can that work? What are you doing? So that was my takeaway from the whole day. I don't know, Zach, maybe you have some more succinct product observations, but at a high level, I think this is almost like a, hey, don't forget about us. We can do this sort of thing.
I mean, my big takeaway was, how many of these they have planned. I mean, we hadn't really heard much at all about what GM's electric plan was at all, but no, just the sheer number of EVs that appear to be coming. They're all coming in a few years. It's all very, out there, like, oh yes, the product will launch fall 2021 or 2022, or, they're saying they think that the demand will be up to around 1 million cars by 2025. I mean, and I know that I was chatting with John, and he said that a lot of the vehicles that they did show, they were sort of clay models almost, with some sort of like fake body tacked onto it. So these are all super early in the planning stages right now, which for the most part, a company like GM or a lot of big car companies, they don't really show us the cars that early. It's going to be like 4 or 5 years until some of these are actually, breaking in any kind of sales. But hey, they're out here committing to the new cars, which is interesting, because now they're on record, and they can't really go back and say, oh, I mean, if they do go back on any of these for any reason, there's some sort of backlash, I would assume. But no, it's interesting to finally see one of the big three's plans for full-on electrification. I mean, and it's also interesting, GM has talked about this before briefly, but they're pretty much skipping plug-in hybrids for the most part. I mean, we got the Volt, but it's just full headlong into EVs. There have been a few hybrids, but no, I mean, there's not much of a plug-in plan, and if there is a plug-in plan, well, they haven't told us about it yet.
I actually think that could be a mistake to just totally skip through like hybrids and plugins. I think near term, you might want to have like that sort of like measured, near term strategy. Now, I went to a dinner or lunch last fall, and Cadillac basically said 2030, we're going to be mostly like all electrics. We might have a few like, ICE, as they call them, internal combustion engine options, but we're going like straight to electric. And I can understand if you want to be like all electric in 10 years, you don't really have time to work on like that interim solution. It's almost like if it's 2:00 and you want to have a fancy dinner, you can't really spend a lot of time making lunch. So I get it, but I also wonder if, to go back to FCA, they're like, we're going to ram Rams and Jeeps down your throat until global warming takes over everything.
Here's another 800 horsepower Challenger.
Right. I mean, like, there is something to be said for living in the moment and living for what you think is next and probably know is next versus, really tilting at sunsets or the horizon, or pick your analogy. So I don't know. Again, I came away impressed, and I don't know, excited is the right word, but I feel like there is a sense of optimism about their technology and capabilities. I think we should move along, though, to the rest of this news section, if you will. When you're talking about news this week, it really was EVs. So GM EVs, now we've got the Porsche 911 could go electric. This is written by Ronan Galan. He's one of our freelancers. I was going to call him our electric freelancers, but I don't think we have any of those just yet.
They live on Electric Avenue.
What's that?
They live on Electric Avenue.
There you go. I'm not going to touch that one. So what do you guys think? 911, should it go electric? Should it go hybrid? What do we think? The headline, I love this headline here. Porsche's brightest minds clash over whether the sacred 911 should go hybrid. Click here. So what do you guys think?
I think it's going to probably go electric anyway, because how it doesn't, I'm curious to see how the packaging will go. Specifically, where do you put the batteries? because in most cars, so if you have like front drive or usually the batteries go underneath the car in kind of a skateboard platform, but I don't know how that would work with the current 911. Therefore, you have to put the batteries somewhere. Where do you put them? I don't know. The other thing is if you remove the engine, basically I'm talking about weight distribution, because it already is kind of doing its own thing by having the engine where it is. But if you remove that and add batteries somewhere else, the driving dynamics of the 911 will be profoundly different. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't know if it's a good thing, but it's definitely going to change what the 911 is. So I'm very curious to know how that can even be possible.
Yeah, I mean, can you call it a 911 if it's not a rear engine car? I mean, that is just so, interconnected with what a Porsche 911 is. I mean, it's the shape too, and it's the spirit of it. But like, a Porsche 911 is a rear engine sports car, and that's what it always has been. And it's tough to get around that by saying, oh, this battery skateboard type thing is also a Porsche 911.
I think for me, the 911, the essence of it is the layout versus the powertrain. So I would go back to what I said about the Corvette, which is like, I'd be okay if they had like one Corvette with a bunch of different powertrain options, from pure ICE to hybrids to all EVs. I think with the Corvette, it's going to be a little easier because they've already sort of broken the egg and they've gone in this dramatic step. With the 911, I think, to echo what you guys said, it's going to be a little trickier. If the skateboard is going to really change what we think of a 911 as being. So, how do you do that? So I think that's where the challenges come. What I'd love to see for the 911 is if they would, again, just let the public decide. Offer, an internal combustion option, keep some of those, maybe not all the different flavors of 911 you could get now, but yeah, maybe keep them. I don't know. But then offer just other versions of it, hybrids, plug in, and then if you're willing to make that compromise, that's what you'd go with.
I think that
but I think that kind of it speaks to the fact that the what I'm talking about, packaging. It's like I literally don't know how you could have both. Like I could foresee that you could see them making an all new electric 911 off the Taycan platform, like that's and be its own car. I don't know enough about the new current 911 platform to know, like, is it really possible to do that? And would it be compromised? I mean, it's Porsche, so no, it wouldn't be, whatever they came up with. But I would be very curious to see.
Yeah,
what that could be.
In Ronan's piece, one of the people that are quoted, Michael Steiner, a Porsche board member, said that the platform is hybrid ready, and that they actually do have prototypes out, but they don't speak about a fully electric version at all. I think that a hybrid could make some sense. I mean, I think that the Cayenne, the Turbo SE hybrid, and also the Panamera Turbo SE hybrid, those are pretty rockin' automobiles. And I think that a 911 hybrid would also make a certain amount of sense and wouldn't turn people off. You could figure out how to package those batteries, since they say that the platform is hybrid ready already. It could be an even higher performance version than the Turbo S is that they just released in Geneva, actually. Well, actually not in Geneva, but same thing. Yeah, I mean, it could, I guess you could go from a 0 to 60 in like 2.7 to like 2.4 or 2.5. You just keep pushing it further with the the electrification of it. But, I mean, if you gave it a little EV range itself, I know there's a lot of European cities that are, they're saying, only running on electricity in the city centers. And I mean, I expect that 911 owners might want to drive their 911s around in the city centers too. I don't know. Yeah,
makes sense. So speaking of driving around city centers, what about delivery vans? Coming soon to maybe an Amazon fleet near you. Ford's electric, I guess they're, I'm not sure what the name of this thing is. The Transit, of course. I don't know if they have a special name for it, but electric Transit. Transit Connect sounds good for an electric one too. They just showed this at the Work Truck Show this week, which I've actually been to this truck show. It's actually pretty fun. You would be surprised at how fun it is. I had a steak. The year I went was in St. Louis. I saw the Arch. It was, yeah, man, it was everything you would expect the Work Truck Show to be. Let's put it that way. They're coming to the United States and Canada for 2022. This is a concept, of course. I do think it's a little cheesy that they did it. The reveal was in like camouflaged. Like, what? Don't do that. Come on, just show us the truck, which essentially they did. And I mean, I don't know. This isn't certainly one we need to spend a lot of time on, but I do think it's a good idea. I think, coming across, the proliferation of just delivery services in general, Amazon and any future Amazon competitors, I think this is good. This is, contemporary. This is probably where things are going. So, yeah.
I think that it'll make my dog happier when the electric van pulls up to deliver my package instead of a very loud old UPS truck. I think that's the number one personal benefit for me.
That's the right take. Yeah, let's not get into like the nuances of this battery pack or how the battery is, the density or anything like that. What's your dog going to say?
Exactly.
James, what's your dog going to say?
Oh, no, I think it'll be both. Yeah, anytime a diesel engine drives by, they absolutely go crazy. And if they hear the sliding door, that's, game over. They go crazy. That's why I'm sitting in a different room than my office, because my office doesn't have a door. And if the UPS guy shows up, then this podcast is ruined. But with the electric delivery van, they're kind of roll your eyes at it, but it's like it's really important because that's a lot of vehicles that are sitting around otherwise idling V8 engines or just internal combustion engines in general. They're sitting around or just driving around town, and if that can be electric, think about like the lowering carbon footprint of any sort of package delivery. Because as of right now, I need a new mouse. Let me buy one on Amazon and go through the process of having that delivered from here to there. I mean, it's really terrible for the environment in terms of just all of this on-demand package delivery thing. So if you can, if there's no way to stop people from doing that and just run down to the store instead, if you can't do that, well then at least lower the environmental impact of that delivery, and switching to electric is definitely a good one, especially with the smaller delivery vans like this, because this can also, not just Amazon, like big time delivery, but just smaller businesses as well, because that's who buys Transit Connects.
Well said, well said. My dog loves the Amazon van too. And with that, we'll spend some money. Okay, this is a rather lengthy one, so I'm going to try to sort of condense it on the fly as I read it, so bear with me here. Hey there, folks. Loves the show and looks forward to it each week. Thanks, man. Thanks for listening. So, had an Accord V6 coupe with a 6-speed manual. Bought it new in 2005. At 16 years old, nonetheless, was the dream car. Finally gave on me at, listen to this, I almost need to stop here, 303,000 miles, and he doesn't want to talk about it. Fair enough. For a replacement, 2018 four-door Taco TRD off-road, and loved it. Totaled while parked. No one was hurt. So that's kind of a rough go-around there. When this happened, he bought his wife an SUV, so he's driving her prior car. For that is his sort of interim ride, which is the 2017 Accord V6 Touring with 90,000 miles, and it's recently paid off. Now he's got to decide what he wants to do next. Daily commute isn't enough that gas mileage really matters. So that's kind of nice. Basically, let's see. Has the option of freeway driving or some fun, twisty back roads. Take the back roads. He has a toy, 94 Toyota Truck Deluxe single cab. Only 114,000 original miles and lovingly maintained. 5-speed, 4-wheel drive. It can handle his truck needs. So he's got the option of going with a car. So here's the field. Option 1 is buy a new Accord Sport with the 2-liter turbo and the 6-speed manual. Okay, only real downside is the black plastic surfaces and the meh stereo, nice word, are something you'd have to eventually upgrade. Drove one and liked everything about it. So just stop right there. way to go. Way to do some homework. Way to test drive something and then come to us. That's always good. Option 2 is order a new taco. Taco Thursday, I guess. We're recording this podcast on a Thursday. This time with the manual, he's got some complaints. Let's put it that way. Thought the other one was underpowered on the highway. Maybe the stick would help. So there's that. That's one option. And then option 3, okay, although he does mention his kids like the Tacoma. Option 3 is keep the current car until the TLX Type S comes out and basically do something like that. Wow, that's a mouthful. I almost feel like we should post this whole letter on here because there's more of it. But that's the basics. Budget is $35,000. He's looked at Mazdas, left Jeeps out because had some rough riding in the 94 Toyota. That's the highlights. Zach, we'll start with you. Give us some ideas here.
All right. So I pretty much took the I don't really care too much about fuel economy and ran with it. My top suggestion would be go find a Chevy SS. He sounds like
that's unconventional. Okay.
He sounds like he likes fun cars. And
didn't see that one coming.
And 4 doors, a big V8. Basically just get the nicest, newest one that you can for around your price point. And yeah, I mean, big V8 American. It is really. It really doesn't have anything to do with any of your 3 options there, but that would be my first choice in your area. If I had to actually pick one of the options, I would totally go with the Honda Accord Sport with the 6-speed manual. That car is so good to drive, really, really good to drive. It'd be a fantastic daily driver. It really is probably the best midsize sedan out on the market right now, hands down. So, but hey, if you want to have more fun, go get the Chevy SS.
Okay, didn't see that one coming. James, you seem to be busting out laughing when the SS was mentioned. What's your offering?
I agree that came out of left field, pleasantly so. So here's the. Yeah, I'm just flummoxed by that. That was a good one. Okay, so he mentions that he's looked at Mazdas and he's found nothing with a manual that had the space or power of the Accord 2.0T. The problem is there is nothing that has the space and power of an Accord 2.0T. Like space alone, that car is really big. And as I forgot that the Chevrolet SS was a thing, and you'd have to get one used. They don't sell that anymore, right?
No, I think it went out of production like a year or 2 ago.
17 or 18, yeah.
Yeah, so again, this is another week where someone wants a manual, but yeah, no one really sells those anymore. So as such, I think you either go for that Accord or find the SS and be different, or yeah, it's just really hard if you want a manual. And yeah, especially if you want something like it to be large. That's a tall order. And otherwise, if you like the Tacoma, have you guys driven one with the manual transmission? I have not.
No,
not with the manual.
We had a TRD off-road in the office about a week or 2 ago, and it was an automatic. So yeah, no manuals.
Sad.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that your option there? Check out the Tacoma too, James?
Yeah, I mean, if you like that, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I have nothing bad to say about it. I mean, I certainly would be intrigued by the manual. I know if the 4Runner, the current generation 4Runner was sold with a manual, there'd probably be one parked out front of my house right now. So, yeah, I think he's on a good... I'm not sure about the TLX Type S. I don't know if that's going to be a thing, and I don't know if that's even a thing you would want.
Yeah, speaking of out of left field, I don't even know what to do with that. So
I bet it won't be offered in a manual. That's the one worry with that car is I have a feeling if they do make it, automatic only. So
yeah, agreed.
I mean, I think just to chime in here, I would Yeah, I don't know. I would throw it, check out a Jeep Wrangler because you can get that with a manual. $35,000. You can start to play around in that range as far as, the Wrangler, depending on what you're willing to take and not take. Otherwise, I think, and I would also check out the Tacoma just because, again, I haven't driven the new one yet, with the manual, but it's a fun truck. I mean, if you don't mind driving like a submarine, it's just so low, even for somebody like me who's not all that tall. But if you want to play it safe, the Accord Sport with the 6-speed is pretty good. I mean, you know what you're going to get. That there's going to be a good level of quality there, and you're going to have fun with it. So I think, if you're looking to play it safe, that's like the play it safe choice. And then you've got a range of options here, from the Tacoma to a Wrangler to, yes, the Chevy SS makes an appearance on the podcast. All those things are our recommendations. Let us know how it goes. We'd love to hear an update from this. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
I'm sad that more cars aren't sold with manual transmissions, and it just shows that probably buying used is your best bet.
Save the manuals is how this gentleman signed off with his email, so maybe that's a good way to end the podcast. Save the manuals. I don't know.
I absolutely. His old Accord with 303,000 miles. I have an old Integra with 225,000 miles right now.
Ooh.
It's fun. I mean, I actually bought it right around the same age that he did. I bought mine right before I turned 16. So I am sorry for your loss, my friend. Really sorry.
On that optimistic note, let's choose to look at the future. 303,000 miles. That's an amazing achievement.
It is.
Don't cry because it's over. Be happy because it happened. This podcast happened, and it was mainly about the Corvette with a lot of other random stuff. Hope you enjoyed the show this week. Be safe out there. We'll see you next time.